Glad you could join us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. Borno State in the northeast of Nigeria is faced with their situation, including outbreak of diseases and dislocation of school calendar, as well as infrastructure weeks after severe floods. Those affected by the severe flooding have been crying out for help. Some have been making efforts to repair and rehabilitate their homes. The state government has so far received about 20 billion naira into the Relief Basket Fund donated by individuals and institutions across the country, and says rehabilitation efforts are commencing. We look at the situation in Borno State after the floods today on the program. Just stay with us. Waters have receded in the worst-hit Maiduguri Metropolitan Council and Jere local government areas. Weeks after the collapse of the Alu Dam caused massive floods in Borno State. Many are returning to their homes and to host communities, while those whose homes remain submerged are being relocated to larger, more centralized temporary sites within the state. According to the Borno State Government Emergency Operations Center, humanitarian needs, however, remain critical despite the significant reduction in the number of displaced people living in emergency shelters, from a peak of 400,000 people at the height of the flooding to about 50,000 registered individuals as of 4th of October. An additional 700,000 people also sought shelter with relatives during the flood emergency, according to authorities. The government says local businesses, particularly those dependent on agriculture, livestock and trade, have been hit hard, with recovery at a slow pace amid a deepening food security and nutrition crisis and a public health emergency. It is believed that sustained assistance is critical to save lives, restore livelihoods, and to rebuild vital infrastructure.
We have not seen anything. I think we had some few people that came from, what do you call it? They came from, is it Boogies? So they came and took some data in our houses that were flooded. But after then, we've not seen anybody. Nothing has happened. So we don't actually know what is happening. But I know I'm not blaming the government because there is so much on the government. When you look at the infrastructure that were destroyed by the flood, so we can't even expect government to do everything. They can't do it. But as little as they can do to people, they should do it at least to show concern and show the people that they are responsible. And with trick, you can see now I'm going to my house now, so you have to trick and then to your house. When you get to that point, you have to trick. The situation is truly, because of this breach and the collapse of it is terrible. It's not funny. And sir, do you know, you can't follow here in the night. You can be attacked in this place in the night. So once it's night around 7 o'clock, you can't even follow because it's not safe. So even if the government can fix this road for us, that God will bless them.
We call government for a quick intervention. As you can see, the bridge, this is how people are suffering. See children, as I'm on my way to school to go and pick my child now. You can see how people are suffering. Old people, men and women, and people from school, you can see the way they are passing through. So we are calling on government for a quick intervention to come and fix this bridge and fix the roads that has been damaged within the community. This is our calling to the government. There's no option. This is the only option that people have. People, you are afraid of something might happen in the night, but definitely you have no option. If you have something emergency to go and do, definitely you have to follow the bridge and go and do it.
There are about 6 bridges that are damaged. The Pori Bridge, that of Lagos Street, the Gwange Bridge, Moro Bridge, and then there's a minor damage to that of Giramadra Bridge. So all those bridges will be fixed back and repaired, and then the roads, the road that are need to be repurchased very, very much. You see, we have a lot of destruction in terms of roads, the Muna roads, the Kashim Ibrahim roads, the Mogorom roads. We have also dual carriageway that of Maiduguri. So the roads requires a lot of work to do. When we are still in the process of assessing the damage, as soon as the assessment is completed, we are going to embark on the construction of the roads and then the fixing of the damaged part of the bridges. Even now, we have done some minor repairs, palliative measures to ensure that people have started using the roads and then the bridges. Because there is no way people cannot move, we have to do something so they can move. Later on, we'll do permanent solution. The permanent solution to that damage part of the water, inshallah, before the end of this month.
Join an assessment tour to inspect key infrastructure following the devastating flood. The Borno State Governor says efforts will be made to build back better. The governor visited vital bridges, including Gwanje Bridge, Fori Bridge, and Murumuru Bridge, which connects Borno's metropolitan area. The tour also included critical government-owned facilities like the Gwanje Maternity Hospital to evaluate the extent of the damage and plan for rebuilding.
One thing we shall do is to stop people from building back inside the waterways. We shall never forfeit the lives and properties of the entire people of Maiduguri in order to support tiny elites, or I can say very few people, to come and build their homes inside the waterways. So on this note, I want to instruct the State Ministry of Water Resources, Works and Housing, the Borno State Information Geographic System, as well as the Flood Committee, the police, the DSS, and all other relevant security agencies to ensure that nobody is allowed to rebuild their homes that were built right inside the waterway. This is a warning signal to all of us. If we want to save the lives and properties of the people, then we must do the right thing by ensuring that nobody is allowed again to build inside the waterways. That's the message that I want to take across to the people of Maiduguri. And I want to re-emphasize this statement again, that yes, we experienced overflowing from the Alo Dam. Yes, we had the problem of breakage of Alo Dam. But believe me sincerely, the major reason why the entire town was submerged is as a result of a human factor. People decided to build inside the waterways. The width of the canal, the waterways, was drastically reduced. And then the water has no way to go rather than to, submerge the buildings.
Meanwhile, a new report by World Weather Attribution highlights the urgent need to prepare for floods that have become regular occurrences due to fossil fuel-driven warming. The study finds that the floods that killed hundreds of people and displaced millions in Sudan, Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad this year were worsened by human-caused climate change. A rapid analysis by a team of scientists said this is expected to occur on average every 3 to 10 years. The rainfall that caused dramatic flooding in Sudan, Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad is nearly identical to the downpours that hit the same region in 2022, which were studied by World Weather Attribution. The researchers say carrying out another analysis would come up with essentially the same result, and based on the previous study, reports that climate change will have made the downpours this year about 5 to 20% more intense across the Niger and Lake Chad basins.
Wet months like this is actually relatively common. We expect similar 30-day accumulated rainfall around once every 3 years in the current climate. But to understand whether that observed trend can be attributed to climate change and to understand likely future changes, we combine those results from the observations with climate models. The majority of the climate models that we looked at indicate a trend towards more extreme rainfall events in this region. And overall, we estimate that the likelihood of wet months like this one has doubled due to climate change, and that the wettest month in each year is now about 10% wetter than it would have been without human-caused climate change.
The study highlights the critical need to improve flood defenses in regions of Africa that are now experiencing frequent floods. The failure of dams in Nigeria and Sudan come a year after Libya experienced its deadliest disaster when 2 dams collapsed after days of heavy rainfall, intensified by climate change, killing more than 12,000 people. Dams need to be repaired, maintained and upgraded to cope with the heavy rainfall that is increasing with fossil fuel warming, the researchers say.
But the floods of 2024 were not just a force of nature, but a reflection of deep-rooted vulnerabilities, amplifying pre-existing human suffering. These floods struck in regions already grappling with conflict, displacement, and fragile infrastructure, acting as risk multipliers. In Sudan, ongoing civil war and protracted humanitarian crisis meant that large segments of the populations were already displaced, making them especially vulnerable. The erosion of the protective status of humanitarian workers, including those under the Red Cross and Red Crescent emblems, further compound the crisis, putting their lives at risk while delaying critical deliveries of food, water, and medical supplies. Camps for internally displaced persons, constructed as temporary shelters, were severely damaged by the floods, leaving thousands more without shelter. Beyond conflict, poor urban planning and rapid growth in informal settlements in flood-prone areas heightened the exposure of vulnerable populations. In Nigeria, many of the most impacted areas had yet to fully recover from the 2022 floods, demonstrating a cyclical pattern of vulnerability. These regions, particularly in urban centers, often lack adequate drainage systems, leaving communities exposed to repeat flood events. Infrastructure failures, especially the collapse of parts of the critical dams in Sudan and Nigeria, served as stark reminders of the need for resilient water management systems.
The study highlights that climate change and conflict are a recipe for disaster. The floods in Sudan have taken place during an ongoing civil war in the country that has displaced more than 10 million people, leading to overcrowded camps, food shortages, and severe cholera epidemics. A violent insurgency has also forced nearly 2.4 million people from their homes in the Lake Chad Basin in West Africa. People affected by war have very limited means to deal with another crisis and can become trapped in desperate cycles of displacement, the researchers say.
We need to do a better job at protecting displaced populations from floods. And we can do this essentially by 2 different ways. So short-term solutions, obviously, and long-term planning. We need to set up safer shelters in more elevated areas, straying away from flood-prone zones and building really proper drainage systems. Again, we need to improve early warning systems, ensuring that these really incredibly vulnerable populations are reached by this critical risk information. Importantly, camps also need really clear evacuation plans and routes. If these are sustained camps, we need to invest in nature-based solutions, which can just be increasing vegetation to improve the absorptive capacity of the ground, also erecting barriers of different sorts. But on the broader scale, local governments, humanitarian actors, and communities must really work together to both plan for floods.
The study was conducted by 11 researchers as part of the World Weather Attribution Group, including scientists from universities and meteorological agencies in Sudan, Egypt, Kenya, the United States, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. Standing on a stack of homemade sandbags in his flooded backyard, father of 7, Datibada, said the floods in Chad's capital had swept higher than previous years and called for better preparedness to address the perennial issue.
It's really complicated for us. We don't know what to do. We are forced to move to find shelter somewhere. I've become a climate refugee and we're struggling with it. If only the authorities could find a solution in advance so that every year it wasn't just water and floods. This year it has gone beyond the usual. It has exceeded expectations. But we're holding on. We're on it. Don't forget we're here.
Chad, Mali, and Niger saw residents wade through flood waters or boats along submerged streets in recent weeks. Some of the 6.6 million people affected by West and Central Africa's monsoon, whose annual trail of destruction has become all too familiar.
Yes, I mean, if you monitor the West African monsoon system, you will notice that over the past 15 years or so, the West African monsoon system has been extremely active. That means that we have had torrential rainfall surpluses almost every year happening in West Africa during the summer season, especially between July and September.
This season, torrential rains in some Sahel countries on the fringes of the Sahara have burst dams, flooded desert towns, killed over 1,460 people, and exacerbated the many humanitarian crises gripping one of the world's poorest regions. The urgency to protect communities better is clear. Floods are the most common and costliest disaster for Africa, and these costs are rising. The continent's disaster-linked economic losses, mainly due to floods, storms and droughts, jumped 52% between 2010 and 2019 compared with the preceding 3 decades, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Worse is forecast for the conflict-torn and food-insecure Sahel. The region is increasingly threatened by floods due to changes in natural climate patterns, greater rainfall intensity, poor urban planning, and other causes.
Il y a eu, n'est-ce pas, comme impact des maisons tombées.
There have been impacts, haven't there? Houses have collapsed, bridges have given way, roads have completely been destroyed, and vehicles have been swept away, especially in the northern regions. And all these incidents have also led to loss of human lives. These are the most devastating consequences we've seen during this season.
Ce sont les conséquences les plus néfastes qu'on a vues pendant cette saison.
According to a 2021 study in the Journal of Hydrology, which noted that widespread havoc and devastation are becoming commonplace. A year after the paper was published, West and Central Africa was swept by one of its worst seasonal flooding disasters on record, with over 8.5 million people affected across 20 countries, according to the UN aid agency, OCHA. This season, as part of Europe's battled record floods, West Africa's monsoon wreaked its increasingly usual damage on parts of the region. Intense heat over the Sahara and other factors pulled the monsoon belt further north than usual, causing downpours in usually arid desert areas. The season was drier than usual in Senegal, much of Burkina Faso and elsewhere, but July to September was among the 5 wettest on record for the past 10 years in much of Niger, Chad, and parts of western Mali. Some areas in western Niger and Mali and the border between Niger and Nigeria saw more rainfall than the calamitous 2022 season. Social media was awash with videos of roads turned to rivers, half-submerged trucks and water damage to Niger's historic UNESCO-listed desert town of Agadez. Mali declared a state of national disaster and pushed back the start of the academic year by a month as schools filled with families driven from their homes by the floods. Grandmother Yakobla sought shelter after a river in the capital Bamako burst its banks, swamped her fishing village in ankle-deep water and destroyed some of its mud-built homes.
It was the river that drove us out of our fishing camp. We lost everything, and now all of my grandchildren are all sick.
Some of these events were foreseeable. Climate experts agree global warming has increased the frequency and intensity of rain, while West Africa is already in a natural decades-long period of wetter monsoons. Ahead of this rainy season, forecasters were predicting heavier than usual rainfall in certain areas, and yet Kadapia, Kobla, and millions of others were caught off guard.
If we're so confident that these systems and approaches are working in some areas, we also have the responsibility to talk about like the constraints more than we do areas where perhaps they're not ready to be developed, and then we can work towards developing the enabling environments before we allocate resources to try it out. So we're at a critical moment, I'd say, and I think the West Africa and Central Africa case exemplifies that, because we had the forecasts were there. The forecast data indicated enhanced rainfall is very likely.
In 2023, the World Meteorological Organization and other international organizations launched an action plan to improve early warning systems for impending natural disasters in Africa, which has the lowest rate of access to such systems of anywhere in the world. However, data shows the vulnerable communities most in need of these warnings are often the least well-equipped to act on them. In Chad, for example, over 40% of the population live in poverty. Meager resources are stretched further by the presence of 2 million refugees, many living in basic camps.
Of course, contexts are different between all of these countries, and people and systems are faced with different challenges. But keeping it on a higher level, I'd say to improve early warning systems for floods in these regions, we need one, better investment in technology and forecasting tools, so more people can be alerted ahead of time. It's important for federal, state, local disaster agencies to work closely together to ensure that warnings are both timely and effective, in part by using multiple channels like mobile alerts, social media, traditional media, to really help get the message across to more people. Importantly, these warnings, as always, need to be simple, clear, actionable, so that everyone, especially vulnerable groups, understands really what to do when a flood is coming. So for that reason, expanding community outreach is really crucial. Essentially, we must both increase the coverage of these warnings, but also educate and train people on how to interpret and respond to warnings, which can be done through campaigns, working with local leaders to raise awareness.
That's our show for the week. Thank you for watching. Should you have any comments or questions, our inbox earthfile@channelstv.com is available anytime, any day. From me, Ayola Kasim, and the crew here in Lagos, it's bye for now.